Morning, everybody.
Morning, everybody. This is the spring exhalations session. We're going to have a great session today. This is going to be a little different for several reasons. The first reason is I woke up this morning, I prepared a script already, and I've scrapped that script. We're going to do something a little different. This is going to be more of a story day. Now, obviously, because you're focused on trying to understand this tea, we will cover the basics of understanding this tea. But we're going to I am going to tell stories related particularly to this tea. So I want to first start off with activities in the shop this week. We've had some interesting things happen, including, but not limited to, people come in. An entrepreneur came in on Sunday, last Sunday, and this is somebody I met about 5 or 6 years ago, tea shop in Central California, and she came swinging through and said, "Where's my tea? How is it you're still getting tea?" And this is on top of other information that Chinatown purveyors are starting to dry up. And the main reason is they're unable to get tea out of China during this unusual period. Without source material, how can you run a business? On the other hand, how are we doing? I wonder if we're getting tea. Well, I certainly paid enough money this week that I better be getting tea. And actually, I've been called by one of the offices that will receive the tea here. And indeed, tea is moving and it's on its way. So we have some exciting things in terms of new offerings. It's probably going to take us the same 2 weeks to a month to get it sorted, to get it named, to get it on the boards and so forth. But the great news is we still have source. And we're going to probably be, if it ever completely dries up, we will be the last affected because we have those type of relationships in China at every single level, which when you do business these days in China, is just simply necessary. You don't have it at the official level, that's an issue. You don't have it at the aggregator level, that's an issue. You're not connected properly with Chinese aggregators and FDA, that's a problem. So there's every sort of challenge which is occurring during this period. But have no fear. We've taken care of all of those for this year, and everything looks smooth sailing so far. So that's the report from the shop this week. So how should we start today? Let me think about this. You know what? Let's start with Greek mythology. I love Greek mythology. I can't remember all those names. There's a lot of names of gods and goddesses, and it's really confusing to remember what they do and who they like and who they dislike. It's a really complicated family. But the one thing I can remember out of Greek mythology is the boss, Zeus. He leads the Greek gods. He's number one. So he's in charge of many things. And one of the things today that we're going to talk about that he's in charge of is oats. Now you may be wondering what the result of being in charge of oats is. Well, in old Greece, if you were exposed as a liar, you had to make some sort of, you had to buy a statue and make an offering to Zeus. That's if you were just a minor liar. If you were a major liar, other things could happen. So today, what we are attempting here to do is to help you gain more experience, to help you move away from the lies of the market, the LCSs of the market and be more informed of what's going on, not only in the market, but with the teas that you love and enjoy. So our promise today, by the conclusion of today, you will have a better understanding of Yunnan or Dianhong red/black teas. And you'll have a lot of stories. So you get both items today during the course of today's session. Now, what else do you get when you're involved with us? You get shortening. I'm not talking about butter, shortening of distance. Distance between what? Between the farmer and you. Because we try and bring you what the life is like with the farmer, what the life is like with the aggregator, what the life is like with a state-owned tea company, and what the life is like with a private tea company. We're going to cover several of those things today, and they're all going to be encapsulated in the stories. And since we all know I have a tremendous lack of self-control, and I already threw out the original script, I better start these stories. Otherwise, we'll be here for an inordinately long time. So we're going to start out with the story of how we came upon spring exhalation. And this story is actually an older story, because we came upon this probably about 9 years ago. And this wasn't a situation where we directly found the farmer. This is a situation where a state-owned tea company helped us find the farmer. And so how did this occur? And what's the story portion of this? Well, this company is located in Kunming. So Kunming is the capital of Yunnan province. And obviously spring exhalations, not obviously, spring exhalations comes from Yunnan province. And so when we visited this tea company, and this is a tea company that we've known probably for 12, 13, 14 years, there was a change in leadership and we didn't realize that. So we showed up, new people in charge. That's okay. Everybody was just pleasant and friendly because some of the other people were still in place. And so they said, hey, we want you this year to buy a lot of fermented tea. And so we demurred and we said, you know what, we're more interested in the red teas. And, you know, there was this subtle dance and they said, okay, well, we'll take you out to Fengcheng. Fengcheng, as you know, and as we've talked about, and you remember we brought this up during Splendor, is the place that Anhui moved factories to avoid the Japanese during World War II. And they moved those factories there in 1938. And at the start of 1939, they got their first crop out of there. And that, in quotes, is the home of Dianhong, or Yunnan red tea. As I explained during Splendor, you will remember that Dianhong now really refers to all the red teas that are created in Yunnan, and it relates that way loosely. It relates very tightly to the red teas from Fengcheng. So everybody agreed, we're going to go to Fengcheng, we're going to take a flight up there, they're going to treat us to that flight. You can't fly into Fengcheng, by the way. You fly into Lincang, and then you take a ride from Lincang to Fengcheng. And we'll talk about that ride along the story path. So everybody's in a good mood that morning because next day we're going to go and it's going to be number 2 from the office plus number 1 in the financial department who has close connections to farmers up in Fengcheng. So the three of us, that's not counting very properly. The four of us are this group. Chinese are taking care of the tickets. We arrive at Kunming Airport. Now, Kunming Airport, for those of you who've not been, it's much, from my perspective, like O'Hare, Chicago O'Hare. Enormous. You have to have real legs. You get 10,000 steps by just walking through the airport. So pre-Fitbit, I always knew I got my quantity of steps whenever I arrived at Kunming, because it takes forever, so to speak, from the time you disembark from a plane until you're out of the airport. Conversely, it also takes forever when you get to the airport to find your terminal. So we find the terminal, and the terminal is a downstairs terminal. And because it's a tiny plane, it's in one of these very small terminals. And the people who are with us said, oh, we've got a store within the terminal. Let's go visit the store and you can see what we're doing on a retail basis. Now, for those of you who traveled with me, you know it is my policy not to miss flights. And in all the years I've been going back and forth to China, in the hundreds and hundreds of flights I've taken, I've only missed two. And the two I missed were because fog shut off all the on-ramps onto the freeway in Beijing that goes to the airport. So there's not a darn thing I could do about either of those occasions, even though I tried. On this day in Kunming, we visited a store and I'm beginning to feel nervous. And I'm not quite sure why I'm feeling nervous. And then I'm thinking, well, what time is it? We have a 9:15 flight and it's 8:55. Shouldn't we be getting to the place? And I brought it up to the people who were accompanying us. Oh, don't worry, everything is okay. And so, okay, don't worry. I'm in China. I'm a guest. How can I worry? And so at 9:10, now the worry button comes on again. And I say to the accounting guy, don't you think we should get down to the terminal? And he says, yeah, we can get there as soon as the other person gets out of the restroom. So 3 or 4 minutes later, we walk down to our terminal. No plane, no passengers waiting. We have missed our flight. Now, the key to this story is this is a state-run company, which means, oh, and by the way, I forgot to mention at the outset, there's only 2 flights a day. So we missed the morning flight. The next flight is at 5:15 in the afternoon. So it's a state-run company, which means that somebody has to report to somebody that this thing has happened. And by the way, with 8 hours, we're not going to wait at the terminal or at the airport for 8 hours. We got to go back to the office. So we all go back to the office. And the fantastical stories you heard told to the leaders, what happened? Oh, the plane took off early without us. And both Xiaobei and I are sitting there thinking, that's a lie. Oops, we're in China. We can't say that. That's not consistent with what we understood to have happened. And so upon further questioning, the stories morph even more. Well, we got trapped in the retail store. Incredible. So why are you hearing this story? Because at the end of the day, even though we weren't responsible for this mistake, we ended up being responsible financially for this mistake, which did not make either Xiaobei or I particularly happy. But that's a whole nother story that will go on to another session. All right, so we get there for the 5:15 flight, plenty of time. We're waiting in that terminal, plenty of time. Plane is on time. Turns out a driver had been waiting for us all day up in Linsang. And we get on the smallest plane that I've ever gotten on since the time I flew from Wuhan to Canton. Many years after going down the Yangtze River, I took that flight. It was a prop jet. It was the noisiest plane I've ever been on. It was a plane where the flight attendants had fly swatters in their hands and were killing flies in the plane. It was so incongruous. And this was the flight, by the way, and some of you who've known me for a while remember me saying that the boat got into port late in Wuhan. And so I thought, well, we missed the flight because it was late by an hour. We get into the taxi because we had nowhere else to go to the airport. And we say to the driver, we think we missed our flight. And he says, I doubt it. We show up, the plane has waited for us. So it's really, that was interesting times. But at any rate, this is the smallest plane since that time. And this is one of those flights you get on and you have all those thermals. And so the plane is going up and down, and the air hostess comes on the intercom. And this is the one where she says, don't worry, you're not going to die today. And everybody on the, and she says this in Chinese. She doesn't say this in English. And I'm thinking to myself, God darn it, don't they teach people not to use the word die on an airplane? And I actually was silently laughing to myself. And this was in Chinese, and people were nervous and so forth. We made it to Linsang. Took a 4-hour nighttime drive to get into Fengcheng proper. Now, we didn't take a toll road. Toll roads are the main way in urbanized China to travel. And they're like freeways, except every 6 to 20 miles, you have to stop and pay a toll. This was one of those private roads through the mountains, one lane in some places, trucks coming barreling down the other way. Suffice it to say, scary, but we made it to destination. And they had asked us whether we wanted to go ahead and see this old tree. And Xiaobei and I, for that trip, said, no, we don't want to see any old trees on this trip. What we want, we're on a schedule, and we're now 12 hours behind schedule because we missed a flight. What we want to do is go to the farms. And that's what we told the head guy who was with us at midnight that night as we were settling in the hotel. He says, that's fine. We have to get up at 7. Okay, so we're up at 7, we go out. And of course, nobody tells us anything or what we're told. And you see, if it were only me, all of you could make an assumption. And you could say, well, gosh, have you forgotten you're an understudy and that Chinese is your second language? Maybe you just didn't understand what was going on. This would be a safe thing for most of you to say. But remember, I had the tea master with me. So it wasn't that we didn't understand what we were told. It was we ended up at that tree unexpectedly. You have a picture of that tree. So that tree is the one with all the scaffolding on it. Why is there scaffolding? By the way, we've sent you this picture without the scaffolding on it before. Why is there all the scaffolding? Because that's the one day of the year that they're actually gonna harvest the tree. And the television crews from Yunnan Central TV come, and we got there before they did. So we were able to walk right up to the tree. And if I'd been bolder, I could have climbed up that scaffolding and actually picked leaves. Now, of course, it's not good manners, very Western thinking. What I did instead was I picked the leaves that were already on the ground. So I was using my good Chinese manners. But the whole issue is that's a 3,300-year-old tree. That tree is about 20 to 25 feet tall. It's so different from the trees in the Ilau Mountains that you've seen from pictures that we've sent you before that are 50 to 80 feet tall. This one is more squat. It is broader. It's a completely different look and feel. Yes?
Why is harvest only one day in a year?
So why is harvest only one day in a year? Great question. That's all they need to get the leaves off. It's not that huge. And they bring several pickers. And remember, this gets auctioned off. And so this goes, the year that we were there, this went for $100,000 a pound at auction. So, it's not like you need to get a lot of leaves off. You still make a lot of money off this tree. And by the way, no farmer owns this tree. This is owned by the government. And so they get the proceeds and they use the proceeds to help farmers and so forth. So that's how this is organized. The other tree picture we sent was a picture of a tree, a smaller tree, 100 feet away from that massive tree. Mm-hmm. It turns out old timers can remember a time when much of that area was like those old trees. Old trees were subsequently cut down after 1949 for a bunch of reasons. They needed wood and so forth. And these aren't particularly nice sounding reasons today. And actually, whoever made those decisions back then didn't really make the right decisions, because these trees were ancient, are ancient, and valuable. But the good news, there is good news. There's 7,000 acres within about a 50 square mile radius of old trees, not this age as far as we know. And this is the Longsan Valley. Now, that doesn't mean River Valley. That doesn't mean anything to you. But if I use the word Mekong River Valley, this means a lot to you. So why is it the Longsan? Because when that river flows in China, they use the Chinese name, Longsan. And then when it flows out into Vietnam, Laos, Burma, and Thailand, they use Mekong. So in this river basin, it's rich in biodiversity. Now, they're thirsty, yes. So, and I knew that once I started on this story mode, this might happen. So I apologize. Tea Master, oh, and she's very thirsty. I can tell, extremely thirsty. The venerable, thirsty Tea Master, shall they?
Thank you. I'm venerable Tea Master. Okay, today, so we do
Spring Exhalations.
So you can see our bodies. Yeah, same you do. Right now, I take water.
So the usual setup. Got 2 or 3 glasses here. She's going to heat the glasses. This is something you've seen for the last 2 weeks. It's the same setup. She's going to use 200-degree water. Make sure that everything is clean and heated. And again, this is start of tea rhythm. So you can't rush this, because if you clink around and try and rush this, you're going to break glasses or you're going to crack glasses. So you do it deliberately with intention, and this starts your whole journey with intention. All right, so she's getting the 175-degree water set. She's going to dissipate or structure the water, dissipate the steam. Now, when you look at your pictures, before we look at anything, we look at the Tea Master take the 5 grams of spring exhalations. Put it in the cup. Shakes the leaves, make sure that they all are getting some warmth, getting heated, and then applies the water on the side. Sets the timer for 3 minutes.
We still need to know the rest of your story after we taste the superb tea. And are you still doing business with these folks?
This is a great question. Are we still doing business with these folks? We had a tumultuous 1 more year relationship, and we're so displeased. We actually did the very unusual thing. Almost, I think the only time we've ever done this, we called a senior leader and talked about how ineffective the department leader was, and laid out the whole program, because we wanted to do business with them because they had incredible access to farmers. But that just didn't work out. And so after that, we've stopped doing business with them. So it took us 1 more year to figure out, okay, we're not going to do business with these people anymore. The farmer we're still doing business with, because the bad behavior of the company had nothing to do with the farmer. And the picture of the Chinese gentleman in the farm is this farmer. And he's a great guy. And, you know, once we left the people who were escorting us, and once we're out in the farms, we connect right away, because we know what we're looking for. The farmers see that we know what we're looking for, and we talk ag language, and it's great. And it's easy for us to foster really great relationships. So to finish up this story, and then try not to wander over into too many more stories, after seeing this tree, the 35 or 3,300-year-old tree, they took us to lunch at a little township. And they were all so proud of the fact that we'd seen this tree, while Xiaobei and I were inside feeling tricked and not very happy. But we were trapped also, because they had access to the car and we did not, and we were guests. And so therefore, we had to have good Chinese manners on display, which we did. And so they had this banquet. And when you go locally places, sometimes there's this idea that let's see if we can shock the foreigner into having bad Chinese manners. We'll talk about what that shock situation was in a minute. The 3 minutes is up. Tea Master deliberately draining. I should say separating the tea leaves from the tea liquor. She's gonna show you the color. Yours should look like this. All right, and we ascertain what the quality arena, we enter the quality arena and ascertain what this is like. So the first thing is the leaves. And right away, there's some quality about these leaves that you're going to tell me about, because this is different from Splendor. This is wildly different from Pinnacle. But you're going to have to tell me why. Now, we enter the quality arena and we double check this nice, beautiful color. And by the way, there isn't much activity with trichomes in here. And there's actually a reason for that. And we'll talk about that in a bit. Let's do the normal 175-degree sip. So mouthfeel, you're trying to ascertain where on the tongue, where in the mouth you're gaining a reaction. There's an aftertaste to this. Think about that. And in a minute, for some people it'll be longer, there'll be energetics reaction.
What are the nutritional properties again of trichomes?
Nutritional properties of trichomes, they're high in antioxidants. These have fewer trichomes because they're much older leaves. The older leaves almost leave the trichome area because the leaves, they don't need it. The trichomes on the younger leaves act as an insecticide, actually, because the bugs bite it, they don't like the flavor, they go elsewhere. On the older leaves, older trees, I should say, the leaves are tough. You don't need it. All right, so it's your turn to brew. And you'll watch and follow. Make sure your tableau gets set up properly. And by the way, while you are doing this, I should have done this right at the start of the broadcast. A reminder to everybody that when your camera is on, we want to make sure you're in your public sanctuary, because what if your camera is on and you go into your secret tea vault and you open and you punch in the combination? It's not security anymore. Everybody sees what your combination is. That's not a good thing. What if you're in even your public sanctuary and unbeknownst to you, somebody walks across behind you and photobombs your situation? Either they're dressed less than they might want to be dressed if they knew you were if they knew they were on a broadcast. Or even worse, can you imagine if you were in a bathroom and the camera was on? So there's all sorts of things that it's really important that you have as a rule of engagement: camera on for the public sanctuary, but not on in other places, because it serves as a distraction for everybody. And fewer distractions is better. All right, so you've heated the cups. You're getting out the 5 grams, which is pre-measured, of spring exhalations. You're going to put it in the heated cup. You're going to shake that. So again, you're trying to distribute the heat among the leaves. And you notice right away, how does Xiaobei tell that she's truly distributed? She smells the cup. And heated leaves start to reveal. They give up their secrets, start to give up their secrets about what the aroma and flavor are going to be. And you put 3 minutes on. And then, yes?
The warm leaves had a hint of smokiness. It was not really roast or charcoal, but it was there behind the malt.
Now, this is interesting. A hint of smokiness behind the malt in the warm leaves. And I'm going to ask you all to continue to think about this aroma and especially the taste, because there is going to be something in here that is so unusual. Now, let's get back to the portion of the story where the host tries to serve the most outrageous thing to see, just what type of foreigner are we dealing with? And so we sit down at the table and they said, oh, this is a specialty, as this lady is carrying this platter in. And there must have been about 12 of us because there were 8 locals, including a couple farmers. And they put it down and I'm looking at this thing. And remember, I'm an experienced person in terms of encountering opportunities to be embarrassed, encountering opportunities to do the wrong thing from a Chinese perspective. But when I saw this, in my heart, I was thinking to myself, okay, this is going to be one of the harder challenges, but I gotta make sure that somebody eats this before I do, because this could end up being my last meal, is what I was thinking, if this thing isn't prepared correctly. And so what thing was I talking about? These were gigantic bees. It was a plate of gigantic bees. And I'm thinking, God, I bet they have gigantic stingers. And my experience here is that even when bees are masquerading as dead on the ground and you hit the stinger area, you can still have a painful result. What if they haven't gotten every one of those stingers out and I eat one of these things and have that happen inside? Yes, exactly. So I did manage to delay my first bite until somebody else local took their first bite. And when they didn't go into convulsions and collapse, I thought, okay, I can be brave. All right, timer has gone off.
Heated leaves, somebody else observes the heated leaves have a sweet caramel to them.
Okay, heated leaves have a sweet caramel. So we have a slight hint of smoke behind malt and sweet caramel. Love all of these descriptions because you're floating around all the things that occur in this tea. And in order for you to finally get everything, you've got to taste it 1 or 2 more times. And already by detecting a little bit of smoke in it, you are detecting something unusual. And it isn't the smoke. Yeah, I get what you're indicating with that smoke. Taste deeper.
Wow, the smell of the warm, dry leaves on this tea is sweet and bright. Strawberry and sugar.
Sweet and bright and sugary. Was it the smell or the taste?
The smell.
Smell,
and then
okay.
There's more. The wet leaves hold on to this, but it's more of a jam than a freshness. The liquor is medium thickness with no astringency. I immediately felt heat vibrate through my body, warming me up in a way I didn't even realize I was cold. then the taste holds onto the sweetness, and the aftertaste was like a toasted cinnamon. Such a surprise.
Oh my
Love that
God.
cinnamon.
You covered everything, and you teased me. And I'm sure you did this on purpose, because the very last word, cinnamon, is what is so unusual about this. You also noted a sweet jamminess to the aroma, merging into a sweet taste in the tea liquor, a toastiness, great catch on that, and a hint of cinnamon. Now, you're all allowed, so long as you don't go over the guardrail. The guardrails now include cinnamon, but what they don't include, I don't want to hear garlic, but a lot of other things. That cinnamon should be opening things to you.
Somebody else gets an aroma of warm apple.
Warm apple, great. So this almost is a little cidery, isn't it?
Tightly rolled dry leaves had a slight floral and sweet aroma. Warm leaves had some freshness, undefined.
Slight floral from the dried leaves and a freshness from the wet leaves with an undefined. And I'm glad you said it that way, because you recognize that there's something else going on in here. And by calling it out as undefined, this gives everybody a chance to think about this. And I will tell you that this is linked to toasty cinnamon.
Tea liquor smells like sweet floral honey, but this person also gets the cinnamon.
Sweet floral honey, perfect. They're clearly, and when you say sweet floral honey, it really brings to mind the link to the jamminess that one of you mentioned previously. And it brings that link almost, you defined it pretty clearly, because you said almost like a strawberry jamminess. And there's a reason you did that. And again, think about the continuum of everything you've heard here, because there is nothing that you're saying that's out of bounds. All of this stuff, and it's linked. It truly is linked together. And this makes this one of the most unique red teas you will ever have.
That first inhalation had a strong, fragrant, almost floral aroma that dissipates to reveal a sweetness and also a dark, toasty chocolate.
Good. A sweetness in addition to a dark, toasty chocolate. So doggone it. Chocolate, strawberry, toasty, smoky, honey, floral, sweetness, and cinnamon. Wow. I like this thing. This thing is really special. Are you sure? I know one of you is going to ask this question, so I'll shortcut it. Are you sure you didn't put some additives in here? I'm very sure. The tea master watched me very closely before I was allowed to touch this morning.
Many observations on the cider front. Hot apple cider with a cinnamon stick.
Love that.
Somebody else gets the warming quality of a hot cider.
Hot apple cider with a cinnamon stick. Great description. And also a description which I apologize, I should have picked up before, because one of you mentioned it, an immediate warming to the body. Absolutely.
Someone gets also a hint of apricot.
A hint of apricot. No problems.
Honey graham crackers, sweet but not overpowering.
Honey graham crackers, sweet but not overpowering. You all are really homing in on this, and this tells you this is something really special. Remember, Splendor, we had a lot of sweetness, we had a little maltiness. Pinnacle, we really focused on the maltiness, more of a little bit of fruitiness underneath. But here, you guys are going to town. Graham cracker, toasty cinnamon, smoky, sweet, floral, honey. This is unbelievable.
Juicy swallow, and now the hint of cinnamon toast.
Juicy swallow with a hint of cinnamon toast. Absolutely.
Rogue, question mark, or ROUGUI question mark?
I don't know why you've used that because that really, in this context, there's two meanings. The rogue way, if you're really thinking of only the spice, that's fine. If you're trying to link it to a cliff tea, that's not fine. But if it's just simply a link to the spice of cinnamon, zero problem.
Yeah, I was thinking with the little flavor or the hint of the flavor of the cinnamon, that maybe it has to do with the old growth bark, but I don't know. I'm excited about the mystery thing.
And I'm glad that, thank you for that, Robbie. I'm glad that you are trying to tie this all together because it really is a mystery and it is really hard to tie together. So if you ask me, and one of you eventually will, is the processing of this particular tea, Spring Exhalations, substantially different than the processing of Splendor? The answer is no. It is not substantially different. What is different is the soil where it grows, location-wise, is different than Splendor. The environment, so the terroir, is somewhat different. But I will tell you, that doesn't explain everything. What more explains is this is older, and in addition to being older, this, not from a processing standpoint, but from a varietal standpoint, is different than Splendor. Even the leaves, you can tell, look different than Splendor. And it really, from our perspective, is driven by the varietal.
Juicy, slightly astringent, lovely long-lasting aftertaste.
Juicy, slightly astringent, lovely long aftertaste. Love that description. This is juicy. And when we go back to the cider for a minute, typically you think of cider as something, particularly if it's non-alcoholic. Yeah, there's a juiciness, there's that apple in there, and there is an aftertaste. This is a lovely aftertaste, just as you stated, and it's because of that hint of spiciness. And by the way, none of you have said this yet, so I'm going to help open the door slightly. When people are grappling with the spiciness, some immediately fall into cinnamon, but others start to identify some other spices. So other spices that have been identified before, in which I can clearly recognize a little hint of cardamom. This isn't overwhelming cardamom, but if you think of cardamom as just a hint, this has it. And usually when I describe this tea to people, I do use the word spiciness, and then for me, pre-use of cinnamon would be first a use of cardamom.
For another taster, she says it has a narrow range in the middle of the mouth with a delightful juiciness, then the warming of the core of the body, but not the full upper body, though her hands are warm.
For another taster, it's a relatively narrow flavor profile within the mouth, but then as the energetics, there's a long description of the energetics as warming down the core, but not warming the whole upper part although the extremities are warmed up. And, thank you for that comment, because that comment indicates that you're really thinking about this as a whole body experience. And that's really valuable because it does affect different parts. For me personally, my feet are warm as heck.
This tea is so exciting from the flavor, the scent. I'm not yet feeling its energetics over the feeling of excitement and surprise and joy, unless those are the energetics.
Love this comment. So great excitement and not feeling the other energetics unless we define excitement as part of the energetic. And I don't see why we shouldn't. And just joy and surprise and just the mystery that all of a sudden this tea unfolds right in front of me.
Another says this is kind of like Guardian Angel, I think. I'm not sure what you're referring to, Erin. It makes your mouth tingle, though, the more you drink, and it's really fun.
She's referring to Immortal Guardian. Oh no, Guardian Angel.
Guardian
No.
Angel? Oh,
Yeah, oh
yeah.
yes,
Okay,
yes,
there you go.
yes, there it
Alright.
is. To one of the new oolong teas, and she's talking about the tingly feeling in the mouth. And so from that perspective, it reminds her of Guardian Angel. And Guardian Angel, by the way, I like this description because Guardian Angel is hugely aggressive and heavy. This isn't heavy, but it certainly grabs your mouth and it grabs your taste buds and forces you to pay attention.
Were there buds in the leaves, and what was the pick?
Yes, it was spring pick, and the question was, were there buds in the leaves? Yes, buds with leaves, and the answer is yes, spring pick.
Does this come from the ancient tree of Sophie?
No, oh no. If it came,
The $100,000 a pound?
yeah, the questioner asked, does this come from the $100,000 a pound ancient tree that we visited? Remembering, although I am the understudy and sometimes my math skills are not good, if we were serving you $100,000 a pound tea, we would have to be charging a different price for this tea tasting. It does come from a very old, we're unclear because the farmer says between 900 and 1400 years old. So they don't necessarily have the exact age of the trees. So if this is in the 1300 part of the grove of trees, then this would be ancient. If it's in the 900, this would be very old, but not ancient, according to the traditional way of thinking about ancient versus old tree. So we're unclear, but no matter what, it's not a young bush. And the other thing, ancient trees and very old trees in general, again, have fewer trichomes. And so you notice that this is startlingly devoid of trichomes. It's got this deep, rich color. It has a few trichomes. I see at the bottom of the cup, it has a few trichomes, but it's not the, you remember with Splendor and Pinnacle, at the bottom of the cup, there was an enormous amount of trichomes and you can actually see them through the cup. Here, it's just not the case because there just aren't as many trichomes. All right, this, we really wanted you to have this experience of this tea because this is like a hidden gem on the board. And actually, when people are looking for something interesting and unique, we have lots of places we can go. But one of our favorite places, especially if a person is an inveterate red tea drinker, is to have them try this because it's so different from expectation and it's so different from most any other red tea you've had.
is a chemical basis for taste and sense, and thus I'm imagining that these tea plants are distinct genetically from all of the others we've had that don't have these flavors and scents. And my question then is, are there other tea plants that have other surprising flavors that are really different from these?
So this questioner asked a really good question with the presupposition that this varietal is genomically different from other varietals. That's a true statement. It is. And the questioner further asked, might it be true that there are other varietals out there that also have very unusual, very different flavor and aroma profiles? And the answer is yes. We've had many. And in fact, we've tried to get some and have succeeded with some of our attempts. Some of the most unique, we're still searching for. We know they're out there and we know what we're looking for. We've just never had the right timing, the right farmer, but we know that they're particularly in the processing. So let's back up a minute, because I realize I may not have given a completely clear answer. So let's be very clear. Yes. Is it genomically different? The answer is yes. Is this maximal flavor strictly because of different genome? No. The farmer's hand plays experience in it. I don't mean the physical hand. The farmer's ability to process, their handcrafted tradition, their recognition of how to process this and get this to this type of a flavor, all play a hand. You can't deconstruct. And I know the tendency is to do that, and sometimes I even unconsciously encourage that. Let's put it all together. You are right, there's a genomic difference, but we got to give credit to this farmer because he knew what to do with this.
Why so few trichomes?
Because again, it's older. So older, the trees don't need those trichomes. Younger, because it's things that are young need more protection, because in the animal world, they have fewer defenses and they're easier to attack, whether it's a plant or a young animal. And so natural mechanisms have evolved over the years to lessen the effect, particularly of pests. And one of them among tea plants is this growing of these hairs, because it just, the bugs don't like them. And by the way, typically plants that have heavy trichomes, it's in that first picking. In other words, the first germination, so the spring pick. As the year goes on, they have fewer and fewer trichomes. And you'll notice as the year goes on, the bugs are particularly numerous and attack these plants.
Remember to tell the rest of the flight delay backstory.
The flight delay back.
We got to the banquet.
Yeah, we got to the banquet. We survived that meal and nobody got sick. It was just from a Western perspective. By the way, for those of you who've been with us, you know that we protect against having that type of stuff served to you unless a surprise occurs. But we're pretty careful about trying to prevent that. So any of you for thinking about future trips, remember, you won't have to pass that type of a test, because we do have relatively good power to screen that stuff out. So to just finish up that story, we survived that banquet, went back to the factory in Kunming, and then that's when we found out we were going to be responsible for missing that, financially responsible for missing that first flight. And actually, the whole thing turned into a mess. and it turned into a mess just simply because there wasn't, well, we were clear. We were real clear, and we said it about 100 times, but they had a business imperative probably that year that they were supposed to sell more fermented tea, and therefore they really weren't interested unless we were going to buy $250,000 worth or $500,000 worth of red tea, which we weren't that year, but we would have purchased a very significant amount if they had been more cooperative. So that's all old history. We don't have any of those type of relationships now. Our relationships are not fraught with the same sorts of challenges that we had early on, and thankfully so. I mean, both sides have matured. We've matured because we used to think that we understood exactly what we should get, and they've matured because they understand that we're doing something very unusual here. And they like what we're doing, and we now like, with the farmers and the aggregators and everybody that we're, the scientists, everybody that we're involved with, we like very much what they're doing. So I went back to that story because we got this tea on this particular trip, or we met this farmer, and this is critical. So stuff is an accumulation of experiences. And by stuff here, what I mean is where we are today is an accumulation of all these interesting experiences. And my original script today was to talk about some of the scientific terminology related to taste. And I realized we had a much more interesting story to tell in terms of the history of how we got this tea. And I thought that you all might be interested in it.
Sending gratitude to the farmer, pickers, and other workers for this tea, and gratitude to John and Sophie for bringing this tea to us.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Really appreciate the gratitude. We're always grateful to these farmers and people who help us in China. And particularly in these difficult times, we're reminded of how much help we really get from everybody. And we really hope that the world gets easier and better. And, you know, you guys are all well known in China. That's what I think you may not understand, because I may not say that clearly enough. The Chinese who are dealing with us at this level are always amazed to know that there are people like you who are enjoying their tea like this, and they are extremely grateful to you. So thank you again for such a great session. You guys gave great feedback. Very happy that you were able to try this tea. And next week we start a new series. It'll start with Siren Song, which is yellow tea. We'll have Old Gold the second week, and then we'll have another red tea called Luscious. So don't throw away your red tea notes, because when we get to Luscious, we're going to go back and compare. You guys be safe this week. Have a great week. Great as usual. Thank you. Bye-bye.